You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, the UK government will set in law the world's most ambitious climate change target. We hear what it'll mean for you as well as big business. The young people campaigning to save the planet and expecting world leaders to take notice. And environmental activist Erin Brockovich tells Sky News the world isn't acting quickly enough on climate change. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show where we track the changes happening to our world right now and meet those coming up with the solutions. And we aim to take you to the heart of the climate crisis, explain the data driving the changes that are already affecting us, but also show you just how far we've come. Now today, the UK government's announced what it's calling a world-leading target to cut carbon emissions by 78% by 2035 from 1990 levels. It's one of the most ambitious environmental targets set out by a developed nation and takes the UK more than three-quarters of the way to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. So here's what it could mean for you. Everyone will need to eat less meat and dairy, whether that's cutting down the amount that you have or committing fully to a plant-based diet. Homes will need to be much better insulated and people will be encouraged to switch from gas to low-carbon heating. The government's banning the sale of new petrol and diesel cars, so there'll be more electric cars on the road. And we'll all need to change the way we travel by driving less and walking and cycling more. Air travel is expected to become more expensive for frequent flyers, and short-haul flights could be banned where train or bus alternatives exist. And couples may be encouraged to have fewer children as a way of reducing their carbon footprint. Well, one of the key things the government will need to do is match policies and practice with the rhetoric of cutting emissions. But an initiative which was designed to help people with things like insulation, the Green Homes Grant, was scrapped just 6 months after it was launched. Well, our climate correspondent Lisa Holland is at a company in Birmingham which was part of that scheme. So, Lisa, how hard is it going to be for the government to reach its target by 2035?
It's a really ambitious target, and it should be good, theoretically, for businesses like this in Birmingham, which installs insulation. We know that about 20% of our emissions in the UK come from our buildings, so we need to better insulate them and stop energy from escaping. There was this scheme, the Green Homes Grant, which was launched by the government. This business here said that it was a fairly chaotic scheme, and that's the nub of the problem. The policies, the foundation for getting to net zero has to match that ambition, and the jury, frankly, is still out about whether that will happen.
Lisa, thank you. Well, one of the key things announced today is that for the first time, the UK's carbon budget will incorporate the country's share of international aviation and shipping emissions. Well, with me is our business correspondent, Helen-Anne Smith. So, Helen-Anne, why is that important?
Well, it matters massively because aviation alone accounts for a huge proportion of our greenhouse gas emissions. But big business will be seeing this, I think, today as a bit of a challenge and an opportunity. An opportunity because they get to potentially access new markets, develop new technology, but a huge challenge as well because particularly for those bigger emitters, some of them will need to radically pivot their businesses and pivot them very fast, and all businesses will need to make cuts. Back in 2018, for example, businesses alone accounted for about 18% of our greenhouse gas emissions, so a big amount. And look, while there are lots and lots of strategies and blueprints and plans on the table for how different sectors are going to cut their emissions, what a lot of people are saying is that when it comes to business, there needs to be a stick as well as a carrot. The best example of this is probably the automotive industry. That new law that we're now aware of, whereby you can't sell petrol or diesel cars from 2030. It was only once that legislative thing came in that we saw a huge swathe of car companies moving to electrify their fleets. So that really matters.
Helen-Anne, thank you. Now, those commitments from the UK government come as a new report from the International Energy Agency has found global carbon dioxide emissions from energy production are on course to surge by 1.5 billion tonnes this year. Now, that would be the second largest increase in history. And here on our data dashboard, you can see how total CO2 emissions are ticking up all the time. And they, of course, have a big influence on this number here, human-induced global warming. So here's those IEA findings in a little bit more detail, and you can see the change in CO2 emissions by fuel from 1990 up to this year. Now, the light blue colour is coal, then oil is in dark blue, and finally gas is in yellow. And the drop that you can see here is due to global lockdowns last year because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But demand for all fossil fuels is set to grow significantly in 2021, with global energy demand set to increase by nearly 5% this year. However, the IEA did find that renewables remain the success story of the COVID-19 era, and they're set to provide more than half of the increase in global electricity supply in 2021. And on our data dashboard, you can see the real-time power mix in Great Britain. Now, today, fossil fuels, as you can see, account for 54% of our energy, renewables 29%, and nuclear 17%. And according to the Chief Executive of National Grid, progress in renewable energy will be crucial to helping the government meet its net zero target.
Most people think only about 10% of our electricity comes from renewables. But actually in 2020, 55% of all the electricity that we had in the UK came from zero carbon generation. So if you compare that with just 5 years ago, for example, so 5 years ago, about 25% of our electricity in the UK came from coal. Last year, it was just 1.6%.
Meanwhile, the National Grid have developed a smart low-energy LED light bulb that glows green to signal when your electricity in your home is powered by clean or green energy sources. It's part of a campaign to help people make smarter decisions about their energy consumption. They hope that people will choose to do things like their laundry or charging an electric car when they know their energy is coming from renewable sources. And you can see a more detailed breakdown of the real-time energy mix on our website. Just head to skynews.com/climate. In today's other climate news, natural habitats will play a crucial role in getting the UK to net zero emissions by 2050. That's according to a report by Natural England, which suggests certain ecosystems can take huge amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Researchers have found a hectare of ancient woodland is capable of storing the same amount of CO2 each year that would be emitted from 13 plane journeys between London and Rome. Scientists are using neon-coloured orbs to investigate the impact rockfalls have on the environment. Test rocks, the heaviest weighing 3,200 kilograms, were dropped down Schraubach-Tobel mountain in the east of Switzerland. Warmer temperatures thaw permafrost that's found on mountain tops, and it causes rocks that were previously held in place by the ice to loosen and fall downhill. And Thailand is close to completing one of the world's biggest floating solar farms. More than 144,000 solar panels have already been installed on the surface of the Sirindhorn Dam in one of the country's northeastern provinces. Authorities say it'll have the capacity to generate 2,725 megawatts of power when it's complete. Now, on Thursday, President Biden will host the Earth Day Summit, bringing together leaders from 40 countries around the world. And today, a digital youth-led summit is taking place to discuss climate issues and form demands that will be presented to the international meeting later this week. Ashna Hurinag has been speaking to activists from Australia, Uganda and the US about their experience of climate campaigning.
A generation fighting for their futures, determined to not let their lives be crippled by climate change. Greta Thunberg may be credited with the school strike snowball effect, but across the world, the climate voices are getting louder and younger. 16-year-old Anjali Sharma is taking the Australian government to court over a new coal mine. She says the burden of responsibility weighs heavy on young shoulders.
And I think that while it is really empowering, I come home sometimes at the end of a long day of, a school strike meeting or, the end of the press conference, and I feel really accomplished. But then it's also kind of bittersweet because it's like, it sucks that I have to take my future into my own hands.
From the front line of the climate crisis in Uganda, activist Vanessa says many are disconnected from a crisis they can't see.
We are all facing the same storm, but we are definitely in different boats. So meaning there are communities that are being affected right now. There are communities whose boats are sinking faster or burning faster. But at the end of it all, if nothing is done about this, then everybody is going to catch fire. Then every boat is going to drown.
At 20, Kevin is demanding cleaner air for Americans. He says his peers are vocal about demanding change because they care.
Young people are really making the connections between women's rights, civil rights, and environmentalism and climate change. That's the reason why young people are so heavily involved, is because we want to grow up in a world where we don't have to be plagued by these injustices, these disparities and inequalities.
As leaders of the future, their passion is driving the climate movement, a generation of trailblazers determined not to be drowned out. Ashna Harinag, Sky News.
Yesterday, we told the story of what residents call Michigan's most toxic postcode, where locals have spent years fighting the quality of the air that they're breathing in. And you can see Cordelia Lynch's report on the 48217 district on our YouTube channel, or watch yesterday's episode on Catch Up. Now, as part of that report, Cordelia spoke to renowned environmental activist Erin Brockovich, whose successful lawsuit against the Pacific Gas and Electric Company was turned into a Hollywood hit starring Julia Roberts.
I know COVID is our priority, and right behind it should be the destruction of this planet, our water, our air, and knowing that changes are coming and we still won't get prepared. The conversation has to be had, it has to be loud, and it has to be all of us.
How shocked and disappointed are you at the kind of status of America when it comes to tackling climate change on the global stage?
Yeah, I'm really frustrated. And, you know, I really try to listen, understand, respect, hear both sides, certainly the people. I've been doing this, I started at 31. I'm 60. Nothing's changed.
Do you think that America is confronting environmental racism enough?
No. And I don't think we have been. And I've been out here for 20 years, and they're at a disadvantage and they get taken advantage of. It's wrong at every see, I'm not going to drop an F-bomb, and I almost did. It's wrong at every level. And it sickens me. And I don't understand, whoever those powers to be, why it is you can't hear the people who are down on the ground, drinking the water, eating the food, living in these conditions, frightened, suffering, and nothing has gotten done. We think what's happening in Michigan may just be happening in Michigan, but it also happened in Hinckley. But I'm here to tell you it's happening in Maine, and it's happening in Oklahoma.
How confident are you that America is going to be able to catch up quickly enough? Because it seems to be a long way behind on this.
For as daunting as everything sees, I see a watershed moment.
Well, that's everything from us for today. On the Daily Climate Show tomorrow, how planting seagrass off the coast of Plymouth could help absorb millions of tonnes of carbon and tackle climate change. That's at the same time here on Sky News. See you then.